When I opened my eyes that morning, the ceiling had become impossibly distant. My body felt wrong, heavy in places it shouldn't be, light where weight should anchor me. I tried to lift my arm and discovered I no longer had arms in any recognizable sense. What moved instead were thin, jointed things that clicked and scraped against the sheets. The sound was alien. The movement was alien. I was alien. Panic should have seized me, but instead there was only a dull recognition, as if some part of me had been expecting this all along. Perhaps transformation is never truly sudden. Perhaps we've been changing all along, and one morning we simply can't ignore it anymore. I attempted to call out, but my voice had abandoned me, replaced by a dry rustling that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. This nightmare I've just described mirrors the opening of Franz Kafka's masterpiece, The Metamorphosis. But Kafka wasn't simply writing horror. He was exploring something far more unsettling, the philosophical reality of modern existence. When Gregor Samsa wakes up as an insect, the transformation itself isn't the point. What matters is what happens after, how the world responds, how he responds to himself. Kafka understood alienation not as a dramatic break from society, but as a creeping realization that we were never truly connected in the first place. Gregor's family doesn't reject him because he's become a bug. They reject him because he can no longer fulfill his function. He can no longer work, provide, be useful. The transformation simply makes visible what was always true. His value was conditional, transactional. This connects to Kafka's broader existential philosophy. We live in systems, families, workplaces, societies that demand we perform certain roles, and we do often without question, until something breaks. The transformation represents that breaking point, the moment when we can no longer maintain the performance. What Kafka shows us is that the real horror isn't becoming something else. It's the realization that who we were before was also a kind of prison. The existential anxiety in Kafka's work comes from this recognition. There is no stable self, no guaranteed meaning, no authority that will validate our existence. Gregor keeps trying to get to work even as an insect because the alternative, accepting that his identity was built on nothing solid, is too terrifying to face. We see ourselves in this struggle. How many of us define ourselves by our productivity, our usefulness to others, our ability to meet external expectations? This is why Kafka remains devastatingly relevant today. We live in an age of constant performance, where our worth is measured in metrics, likes, productivity scores. We're always one transformation away from obsolescence, one algorithm change, one corporate restructuring, one shift in social norms. Kafka saw this coming. He understood that modern life would turn us all into Gregor Samsa, desperately trying to prove our value in systems that view us as interchangeable parts. The genius of the Metamorphosis is that it takes these abstract philosophical anxieties and makes them visceral, physical, undeniable. The transformation is absurd, yes, but it's also brutally honest. It strips away all the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about belonging, purpose, and human connection. What remains is the raw truth. We are alone, we are vulnerable, and the structures we depend on are far more fragile than we want to believe. So I invite you to sit with this discomfort for a moment. Think about the roles you perform each day, the versions of yourself you present to different people, the ways you measure your own worth. Have you ever felt like Gregor, trapped in a form that doesn't quite fit, going through motions that feel increasingly hollow? Have you experienced that quiet dread when you realize that if you stopped performing, stopped being useful, something fundamental might shift in how others see you? Or worse, how you see yourself? These aren't just literary questions. They're invitations to examine the small transformations happening in your own life. The moments when you feel disconnected from the person you thought you were. The times when belonging feels conditional. When anxiety creeps in about whether you're enough. Kafka's genius was recognizing that we don't need to wake up as insects to experience alienation. We experience it in the everyday, in the gap between who we are and who we're expected to be. But here's what Kafka also teaches us, perhaps unintentionally. In recognizing these patterns, in naming this alienation, we take the first step towards something else. Not escape necessarily, but awareness. the courage to ask whether the systems we're performing for deserve our loyalty. The possibility of choosing, even in small ways, to live more authentically, even when that authenticity makes us vulnerable, even when it means risking the conditional acceptance we've grown accustomed to. What would it mean to acknowledge your own metamorphosis, not as tragedy, but as truth? To recognize that transformation, uncomfortable as it is, might be the only honest response to a life that demands we be something we're not. These are the questions Kafka leaves us with, and they're worth carrying forward into our own mornings, our own awakenings, our own struggles to belong in a world that often feels as alien as Gregor's bedroom ceiling.